It seems that every day there is difficult news. That is to put it mildly. The reality is it's bad news or devastating news, and somehow we try to find a way to live day to day. During our study that happens on Wednesday evenings in this church, we have been reading the book White Rage, which describes the difficulty of the relationship between the black community and the white community over many years that has put us in an incredibly difficult social circumstance, one that yearns for justice. But this book basically describes how injustice has complicated year over year over year that capacity. This comes, of course, as we know, in the middle of the COVID-19 epidemic and the difficulty that we have had as a culture and a community to get a handle on the way we will relate to each other safely. And then there comes the vaccine. We know that the economy is devastating. We know that we cannot travel to see loved ones. We know that there are over 220,000 people who have died, many of them alone, many of them people of color or the elderly, marginalized people, many without access to health care, many, even if they have recovered physically, they have not had insurance, and therefore their financial future is in jeopardy. People have used the word despair to describe their feelings about all of these matters. They find it increasingly difficult to give thanks for life itself, or at least give thanks to God. I've searched within my own spiritual journey and realized that there are hymns that come into my mind and my heart. And I'm not surprised to know that those hymns are actually spirituals out of the African American tradition. And I realize the reason that they give me comfort and hope at this time is that they are written by people who are in the midst of despair. When I was at the seminary, I would teach preaching from time to time. And we would teach the various ways in which a person could preach, the various forms that have come down to us. The earliest form in the United States was called Puritan Plain Style, which basically took the text, exegeted or explained the text, and then applied the text very simply. We in our white culture, or predominantly white culture, still extract from the text moral lessons, ethical lessons, theological lessons, philosophical lessons. But when this word despair came, I realized that in the African American tradition, the important way of preaching is the narrative, often lodged within a sweeping biblical story. The Exodus, for example, the movement from slavery into the even more difficult times of wandering in the wilderness, especially through that valley of snakes and scorpions. But the future holds a promised land. Keep going, keep at it. We are going to get to the promised land. We know that this is the style that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. used in the I Have a Dream speech. So I've repaired to the hymnal, to the spirituals. And these songs have been upon my heart. Often, interestingly, in the tradition from which I come, they're sung around the time of a funeral. But I think they help us during times of despair. Thomas Dorsey's hymn of the beginning of the last century, "Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, Let me stand. I am tired. I am weak. I am worn. Through the dawn, through the night, lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. Deep river, my home is over Jordan. Deep river, I want to cross over into campground. And other times I would think that to sing these hymns was maudlin, difficult, because we believe in our own agency that will get us through, our own capacity to conquer and to be strong and to dominate. But we know now that we are in a wilderness, a desert, an exile, a time of despair. It is the spirituals to which we all might repair, knowing that we are on this difficult journey and that we can redeem this time by clinging to a vision of a new heaven and a new earth, a place of peace and hope where all of the children of God might live in harmony one with another, where heaven and earth are one, as our prayer that Jesus taught us goes. As I reflect on what I have just said, in more halcyon days, I would think that these might be the ravings of a lunatic. That if I were in despair, I simply needed to get a backbone, a spleen, and to march on. But I recognize that in these times of great despair, we join with others and sing these deep hymns of the faith to go through the difficult trials and come at last to the promised place. Blessings to you. We'll get there together. Amen.